Well, good evening. It's good to be back with you again. We got Heidi Hollis on with us and a great guest, and actually two great guests, and Paul and Ben Eno are going to be on with us a little later. And Heidi, the news hasn't let us down this week either.
Sure hasn't. It's been a wild week.
Well, of course, the one I liked the most was that last night's, well, it came out a day before, but CBS had a really full disclosure on the Air Force intelligence agent that spilled the beans on the ongoing UFO studies the government was making. And they showed excellent footage on CBS. I don't know if you saw it or not, but it was over San Diego, and it was Navy jets. And the guy was saying, holy blank, 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 what is this thing? And obviously, what we both know is that this is, UFOs are as real as the shoes on your feet. I mean, it's not like it's anybody that says different is pretty gullible, is what I'm saying. But,
yeah, I did a special for UFO Headline News for today, reading the New York Times article and
the New York Times.
Giving my 2 cents worth. What was that?
Yeah, the New York Times broke the story, and then the
right. So I read the article on UFO Headline News, and so check it out if you guys want to hear it. And my thoughts on it were, yay. They finally have caved in after so many people have lost their minds and lives and families and friends because they claim to have seen UFOs or aliens and were totally dissed. Thanks a lot, government.
I know what you're saying. But, actually, in 2002 or 2003, I'm not sure at this point, but Admiral Peter Hill Norton, who was the British version of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, their counterpart, they asked him about UFOs, and he was straightforward. He said, yes, they exist. We don't know what their deal is or where they're from, and we can't do anything about them, but we know they exist. And this guy was straightforward about it. And like here again, Heidi, this is an admiral in the British Navy. I mean, he's and the chairman of their Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's not some kind of yo-yo, and he's obviously privy to everything. And he just said it straight out like that, that all those many years ago. So there's no doubt of it. But anyhow, right. I was just tickled by it. And now this is unfortunate, but there was another piece they had tonight on that Tacoma train disaster. And no, I don't work for CBS, but I've always had a love affair with CBS. But anyway, there was a train disaster in Tacoma. You probably heard of that. But how can this monkey be going 80 miles an hour in a 30-mile zone? How can this engineer do that? I mean... Well,
a witness made an interesting statement. It's like, gosh, I hope they did some dry runs without any passengers on there before they did this maiden voyage, It's like the Titanic. This is the train of Titanics here, or Titanic of train rides. There you go. Maiden voyage, and... wow, it's just sad.
Well, it was only a couple of years ago, it was either Philly or New York, that the guy did the same thing. He was taking the turn about 80 or 90, and he's supposed to go 30, and he flipped out too. So,
well, did they not see the speed sign? I mean, how do train operators know the speed? That's
well, they do
question.
They do have computer overlays that show that, hey, it's 30 here or 30 there or whatever.
Why wouldn't it automatically tell them? It's like boom.
Well, they had that equipment. Oh, I know what it was. They had that equipment on CBS where that but they got a case of the cheaps and they didn't want to update all that equipment with the updated equipment that they were wanting to have installed. Yes, it would be like a governor on the train where it would, click in and it cuts it back to 30 like it's supposed to be or whatever. But they got a case of the cheapskates. And that's why that equipment wasn't in the mix.
And what did this cost? $180 million or something to make between was it Seattle and Portland or something? Something crazy. And then they didn't want to put that last little safety thing in there to I don't know, save lives. What?
I know.
Heck?
Is that nuts or what? I know. Heidi, they've got governors. They've got governors just on commercial trucks to not, so they won't speed and stuff like that. I mean, I know a train may be more sophisticated, but.
They need Tesla trains then to automatically drive the freaking trains. If they don't want to be responsible engineers driving them, might as well. Tesla trains, here they come. Tesla
Well,
train.
they just sold a bunch of Tesla trucks to some UPS or somebody who's going to buy like a gazillion Tesla trucks. They're just talking about that on the news tonight, too. But I don't know. But that was a terrible thing. And it's obviously, like you're saying, it's certainly avoidable. But, well, now, there's a gal that's been on Catherine Austin Fitz is her name. She's been on Coast to Coast a lot. She's a pretty long-term guest on Coast to Coast. She's a pretty good financial consultant. And she was on InfoWars today. And she brought up how Trump has ordered an audit to his credit that the Pentagon's lost $21 trillion. They don't know where it went to. And this isn't the first time, because even if you remember correctly, back years ago when Donald Rumsfeld was Secretary of Defense in the Bush administration, he said, they asked about the $3 trillion, said, oh, I don't know, it's missing, I don't know. I mean, like I left my pen here, I don't know where it is, about like
probably busy investing in building UFOs. Jeez, it's crazy.
There's no telling. Now that is the real truth, is who knows how far all this stuff goes and where it goes and everything else. That's really true. But I don't know. But anyhow, the 21 trillion is missing, and Trumpy's trying to find it. So at least to his credit, he's trying to do that, which, I have to applaud.
If anybody could scrape up a dime, it would be Trump. I mean, how many times did he go bankrupt?
I want to go with the 21. Oh, I know. But I mean, 21 trillion, that's pretty heavy bucks,
Yeah.
Now, I did send you that photo on my book cover. Sometimes you look past it, even though I've, got the cover. But I mean, on the cover of my book, Marian Apparitions Are Real, is a photo that was taken in Medjugorje, the site of the Marian Apparition. And it was taken by an associate of the deacons. One of the deacons' wives from my church went with another lady to Medjugorje. They're pilgrims there. And her companion, the deacon's wife, that is her companion, took that photo, and there was no image of the Virgin Mary on the mountain. It was just a, historic site. And when it was developed, yes, indeed, it did have an overlay of the vision of the Virgin Mary. And anybody that's interested in seeing it could go to Marian Apparitions Are Real on Amazon, the image of it. And Heidi, these are people that are not making any money. They're not even selling books. Of course, making books don't sell much money anyway. No. But what I'm saying is that they have no vested interest in misleading anyone. These people are in the church every time the doors are open. So what I'm saying is, if anybody wants to see a truly miraculous photo, they can go to Marian Apparitions Are Real and take a look at it. But it's funny, there's a lot of that running around, Heidi. There really is.
Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, I saw that. That was interesting photo.
But how would you like to have been that woman when you saw your photo develop? I bet you hit the floor like a flounder,
Yeah, it was pretty distinctive.
Oh, it was. And I like I say, I don't have a portable lie detector, but there's no reason for these people to lie. They're just churchy folks, and that's it. They don't, there's no vested interest. But I don't know. We have a good guest tonight. Paul's got a lot of stuff going on up in New England, and the Bridgewater Triangle is always an interesting place, and he has many other ongoing sites. I want to hear more about those dachshunds, though. I do, because I love ghost doggy stories. So
there you go.
We're just about ready to go to our first break, though, and then we'll have Paul on and Ben and have a big old time. So we'll be right back. Well, it's good to be back. We got Paul and Ben Eno on with us, and of course Heidi Hollis is milling about in the background there too, and ought to be a great show. Now, for those not familiar with Paul, which I'm sure most of you are, but Paul and Ben have a show in Boston, had for years, and Behind the Paranormal, and it's Paul is just a hell of an investigator. I mean, he really is, and it's good to have you back, Paul.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah, what haven't you looked into, Paul and Ben, that you would like to? How about that?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, well, let's see. There isn't much because we kept running into all sorts of things unexpectedly while doing ghost research, if you will. That applied to me back in the 70s, and that's why we're so broadly based today, because we investigate a ghost case, and you'd run into UFOs. And if you looked outside of a house and a family, you would find an entire area affected, and that's our specialty today.
Very cool. It's all connected, though. That's what I've found. Is that what you're?
Yeah, precisely. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. From the spiritual to the solid UFOs flying around. Yeah. All of it.
I wonder what form it would be connected, though. It seems disparate. I mean.
Well, it does.
I'm not saying it's not.
You didn't read our 2016 book, Kevin. So
I did.
He doesn't read my book either, so don't feel offended.
Oh, okay. I don't feel bad. All right. Well, essentially, you could trace, and maybe Ben has some thoughts on this, but you can trace to the same process being involved, the same background process being involved with all these phenomena, and that, in our opinion, is the only thing that in my early days would explain the things I was seeing, and that's some variation on the multiple worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, which is an accepted theory in physics. And some would say it's not a theory anymore because people are building quantum computers and they're actually using it. And what it says is that we are what you see is not what you get. All around us there are perhaps an infinite number, depending on who you talk to, of parallel worlds, most entirely physical like ourselves, other versions of ourselves, and it's an open system. It's not like Hollywood never gets it right anyway, but they used to have a show called Quantum Leap, and I never really watched it. Some people would leap, from one world to another. That's not really how it works. They seem to blend, and some of them have different laws of physics, which makes it interesting and can explain why I stood there in 1974 with first responders all around me and watched a refrigerator float. The thing was about 300 pounds. So that would explain quite readily, really, all areas of the paranormal if you look at it from that point of view. Maybe we're wrong, but that's the theory I've gone on for the last 40 years. And Ben, of course, had no choice. He grew up with me, and obviously
poor Ben
listened to every lecture since he was 10, and he can take it from there, I guess.
Well, I think we can't neglect perspective. Perspective is an incredibly important tool because it's almost 90% of the time incorrect. So, I mean, how we interpret the world around us is really how the phenomena is experienced. For example, I can never name the case off the top of my head, but there was some haunted bar or whatever, and if you go into the basement, people would see this woman. So they sent in couple different people. One person saw just a floating ball. One person saw a woman in a dress, and one person saw a wispy kind of figure. What you bring to the experience is what you get out of it. Is what we've found. So I mean, if you go into a place expecting dead people, of course you're gonna see what you think to be dead people. Right. You get EVPs of stuff people are like, oh, I'm from the 1700s, but it's they don't talk anything like someone from the 1700s.
Can our eyeballs be truly I don't know, our filters to seeing these things a certain way? I mean, they have eye scans in all these sci-fi movies because each eyeball is different. It's like a fingerprint. So is it potentially that we're literally interpreting through a filter that is individually different? So I mean, it's just natural to, be able to see something clearer than the next person or not.
Well, we do that anyway, don't we?
Well, the eye is connected to the brain, yes. So
for some,
no. Well, yeah.
Apparently, to the U.S. government, we are now not to interpret what we see flying in the sky because we are not credible witnesses, So.
Oh yeah. Well, so the human brain, is. I don't want to say like a computer because that's too materialistic. It takes what we see and processes it. So I mean, there's such a thing as pareidolia, where you see something and that doesn't make sense, so your brain automatically makes sense of it. But there's also a really fun thing that I learned from a good good friend and colleague of ours, which Andy Kitt was explaining to us. He's getting his PhD in psychovisuals, I believe is the term, which is essentially the psychology of vision and how we see things. so he could get a degree that's credible, but not entirely in like some in the paranormal realm, but he still applies it to that. So he brought up something really interesting, which I never really thought of, and he's like, the human eye can only perceive so much. I didn't know this, but like as long as the farthest you can hold out your arms and put your thumbs up, that's as far as you can perceive depth with like any real precision. So depth perception, like true depth perception, is only available to 20% of the population. So the other 80% does not have true depth perception.
Wow, I'm really surprised that you would say that about your fellow men, because us ladies always suspect that men have a different view anyways, but there are more than 20%. But
I've experienced that because, no, I've experienced that because even on a more mundane level, I'm one of the 10% of guys that can see colors. And that's why, I used to re-dye vinyl and leather and stuff like that because I could mix colors by eye. And women can do it readily, but very few guys can. It's amazing
that our brain does these things and deals with such patterns that when we deal with something that's outside of the patterns that we normally interact with, of course, things will get interpreted in different ways and experienced in different ways, especially if you're just dealing with the five senses. Empirical reasoning is kind of on the outs at this point because sometimes there are things that exist that you can't see, hear, smell, touch, or taste.
Right, exactly. That's true. Paul, one of the things I found that was strange, and I guess everybody
only one.
Well, I know, but within my little realm of interest is, of course, I got a lot of interest, but I mean, my specific interest is there's a picture of the Virgin Mary in a museum in Italy, and in the upper right-hand corner, there's a UFO. And it's been in constant custody of the church for of that museum rather, for 500 years.
Yeah.
Before any shows or comic strips or,
Yeah, I know the one you mean. I think you have to be familiar with the art motifs of the period. Very often in the Renaissance, they would interpret ancient art correctly or incorrectly, and very often there is a star would be depicted with someone driving it. Now, I'm not saying not to be a killjoy here, but I mean, that's one possibility. But then you go back to people like Akhenaten and Amenhotep IV in Egypt, who had this experience with a disc in the sky, and all of a sudden he changed threw all the ancient gods the heck out of the temples, and everybody had to worship this disc. So you don't know what the origins of these are, but they are suspicious. So I think that the painting you refer to is just as suspicious as.
Well, that could be, but there was one I saw. Karen Dolan, Richard Dolan's ex-wife. She had a thing up at the Arkansas UFO Festival a few years back. Well, it's actually been quite a few years back now, 7 or 8, 9. But what it was she had a little slide presentation that there was the Pyrenees Mountains in France. They had what looked like an exact copy of the George Jetson-y looking vehicles from the old comic show, the Jetsons.
Yeah.
I mean, exactly. And they were carbon dated to 6000 BC.
Well, what were they carved on that they could be carbon dated? That has to be, it can't be rock. It has to be organic.
No, it was painted, some form of painting.
Oh, paint. Okay, well, the paint was organic. Yeah, you could do that.
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, it was mind blowing because it would look just like the George Jetson looking vehicle. They said, "Come."
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we show in our lectures all sorts of things like that from and it is difficult to explain them away in any other way. And now Van Daniken just came out with a new book. The Gods Are Still With Us because. We're going to hopefully have him on our show about that. But
I'm getting him in January, actually.
Are you? Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. He's going to be on my show, The Outlander. Yeah.
I didn't know the old boy was still
with booking him. Well, we're all getting in line to book him for this. But I mean, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with him. I mean, he's no prize, but I think he stumbled onto something that was very important. He's not the first to come up with the idea that ancient gods were actually alien visitors. I think that's far too narrow a possibility. I think it could be something a lot more than that, but we'll see what he has to say. I just got the book, haven't had a chance to read it yet.
I thought he'd met his maker a long time ago, huh?
No, he's still kicking. Yeah.
Yeah, he's good.
Okay. Yeah, he's with 65 million books in print. I wouldn't die either.
He's been on this network a few times, I heard, too, because as I'm trying to arrange the time zone with him, the difference, I'm finding some challenges
Heidi's
with that.
taken over the UFO Report show.
Yes, UFO Headline News.
Oh, I didn't know that. Congratulations, Heidi. You deserve it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been interesting. Let me tell you, I vented today about that New York Times article because it's just... I mean, I don't know. I know that you guys have been in this for a long time too, and I know you've met a lot of people that have really gone over the edge because of some of the things that they've experienced in regards to UFOs and aliens, and go to a therapist, find they have PTSD, and they're never the same. They lose their wives, they lose their jobs, some commit suicide, and it's like, oh, and Mr. Harry Reid, who's buddies with Bigelow. It's just, let's make this as covert as we possibly can and steal $22 million. I'm sorry, dedicate $22 million to keeping this highly secret. And, it goes deeper than that, but it just ticks me off. But it ticks me off the way that they went about things. And it's like, it's no big thing. And so we were doing this. It's like, you know what? A lot of people have suffered for a long time. And they said, where's the panic that they said we would be all under? I would like to know where the panic is in the streets, because they said if they ever came forward and said UFOs are real, this is probably why they won't tell us. I'm like, people in the government are able to handle this information. Well, they just said aliens are real, essentially. And, people are still walking with two legs. They're not pulling their hair out.
There are a lot of assumptions in what you just said there, Heidi. Well, if you look at first of all, I tend, because this always, we speak at a lot of UFO conferences. Ironically, we're not too well liked at the ghost conferences because we're bad for business. We question their theories. But the UFO people tend to be more open-minded to what we have to say. And one of those things is I can't speak for Ben, but I tend to be a climate skeptic. No, not a climate, a disclosure skeptic. Because, first of all, how naive are we anyway? Who believes the government? Do you really think they're going to come out and tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Oh, no. That's
and
never
all
happening.
Of it? No. I can't. And Kevin, you and I are both veterans, and I think we had a naughty acquaintance with the intelligence community, and it's just not how it works. They have some agenda, and Harry Reid and he's no prize either, but anything, and Kevin will back me up on this, anything that's in the sky that is not known is a potential threat. And they're going to look at it, As far as I think that there's misdirection here, as always, because they're throwing a bone to the naive UFO community, perhaps. Our opinion, and it's a very strong opinion, I know Ben agrees with me on this, is that the reason things are kept secret is because we're dealing with what we've already brought up, this multiverse thing. I don't think we all grew up with Mr. Spock and the Klingons and the apes and the whatever, So I think people would be okay with this. I think people are ready for the idea of alien life. I don't think any intelligent person can really deny it anymore, just from what we've seen with the size. We've gotten a sense of the size of the universe. It's, really awesome, of course. However, it's fine if they're far away on some other planet, or even visiting now and then, but go home later. I don't think that's really what it is. I think that the big secret is actually that these things are not far away. They're right next to us in parallel worlds all the time. Our greatest dreams and our worst nightmares. Not to oversimplify, but I think that's the big that would send society over the edge.
They definitely are not going to fully disclose. That's for certain. But I'm highly. Right, it's like even when I was reviewing it, it's like I think I gave a 2-finger clap because that was just nothing. That was nothing for what they stood for.
Well, this has been going on since 1909 at least. probably way before that with the military. I mean, there are stories going back to the Civil War or before, just in this country, never mind the Egyptians or the Romans and everybody else out there.
Yeah.
Who've had UFO experiences, so this is nothing new. Ben's mom, she keeps our feet on the ground. The practical lady said that she saw the video from CBS. That looks like a fly on the windshield.
Right.
I don't mean to rub. Coming to our bottom of the hour break, and we'll be right back. Well, it's good to be back with Ben and Paul, and I don't know. I guess what you're saying was very intriguing. I never really thought about it that way, but to think about the multiverse aspect of overlap of dimensionality and all this would be far more unsettling than some alien that might visit you from Saturn or something now and then, or whatever, some galaxy.
That's our opinion anyway.
Well, it sounds intriguing. Yeah, it could be, yes, but
it's one possibility.
It is. But then there's so many, like you're saying, that the historical aspects, like Christopher Columbus when he came over here saw all kinds of oddball stuff in the Bermuda Triangle at that time, and he was a veteran mariner and all that. I mean, they knew what was an anomaly and what wasn't, and. I mean, I think if I remember correctly, it was Encounters with the Unexplained had a show on that. It was like there was luminous submarines that were shadowing his boats or something like that. So, welcome to the Bermuda Triangle, Europeans, or something like that.
Well, there's phosphorescence in the water down there. I mean, I was down there in the Coast Guard, and one time I was on the bridge, and the compass started to just go round and round. It's, major heavy-duty military-grade ship's compass, right? And people who hadn't been there, the quartermaster called out to the captain, who happened to be on the bridge too, and he said, "Oh, Captain," he said, and the captain very calmly said, "It'll be over in a minute. Don't worry about it." So that's a minute or two with a U.S. warship with no navigation, but it did end.
Wow.
So,
well, there was one that was very freaky. This guy that was he's a retired. I don't think he was a Navy chief. I think he got bumped down in grade, and he had disability retirement. Yeah, but still, he was a nice enough guy, and he was petty officer of the watch at one time on a carrier, so he wasn't that bad. But what it was the boat was making relocating from Corpus Christi to Pensacola, I think it was, and is crossing the Gulf in any case. And in the context of making that crossing, there was about 300 guys that saw the outlines of a ship in the horizon, and the radar picked up different other commercial boats and stuff like that, but this outline of the ship was not picked up on the Navy's radar. And, of course, it was such a big deal for anything to get close to a carrier that, even the Pentagon was interested in what the heck's going on down there and all this. But anyway, 300 guys saw what was not even supposed to exist on radar, the silhouette of it. And it was mind-boggling to that day. And they were basically told to shut up about it, too.
Yeah. Well, Ben and I have been looking lately into a phenomenon known as the Bouguer anomaly. Okay, it's a well-known gravitational anomaly. As a matter of fact, geologists and engineers use it to look for oil and gas deposits. And that's how it came up in areas where you'd have things like the Mothman phenomena going on. And what it is, it's a gravitational anomaly, whereas you'd think when you get closer to the center of the Earth, the gravity would increase, right? Well, that's not always the case. Where this anomaly is present, and it depends on the kind of rocks and all, you go down, say, into a river valley, and you get lighter. Now, you put two and two together. What did Einstein say that gravity does? It bends space and time, which you thought was the same thing, right? Yeah, so we're looking into now where are the Bouguer anomalies most strong and prominent, and where do the paranormal things take place? So far, it's a complete bullseye. You have the Rome Trough, as it's known to geologists, running from north of Pittsburgh, all the way down through the Ohio Valley, all the way into Kentucky. And what have you got along that line? You've got the Pennsylvania Triangle, one of our biggest cases right now, down through Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, you've got a whole Mothman area from the 1960s, the whole Ohio Valley, all the way down into Kentucky to one we're just getting into, which is the Panther Rock Kentucky area triangle. So, I mean, and in Connecticut, the Litchfield Triangle, right smack in the middle, Torrington, Litchfield, and Goshen, is the strongest Bouger anomaly in Connecticut. So maybe it's a coincidence, maybe not. We're just looking into it. So,
well, look what's going on in Chicago with the giant Batman.
Yes.
I mean, we are Gotham City, you know that in the movies.
Yes.
And here we have a giant Batman-like creature just flapping around, screeching, freaking people out. And he's huge.
We managed to squeeze that at the last minute into our latest book, which is about cryptids. And the whole Mothman chapter, we managed to squeeze that in just before it went to press. So
when did it come out, Paul? When did it come out?
That came out in July, the second in the Behind the Paranormal series.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But now you mentioned in that book about the Chicago Mothman.
Yeah.
Issue.
When's
the last time that was seen out there, Heidi?
I'm not sure when the very last one was seen, but there seems to be a good hangout spot that this thing likes to be at, which is on Lakeshore Drive underneath a bridge there near Navy Pier. Mm-hmm. There's been at least 2 sightings that I came across that they've spotted him under there, only to have him flap out from underneath there and freak people out. Can you imagine driving along?
Does he fly or something? Or does he fly or?
Yeah, he does. And and there's a neighborhood called Little Village over here that's predominantly a Hispanic area. And I mean, they hear him shriek. They see him standing upright. They think it's a man, and he just jumps up and flies off. I mean, just freaking people out.
The hell out of you. That's pretty good. All right.
Yeah.
Harry Reid better investigate that because he's not in the Senate anymore.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So
now, of course. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Paul.
Oh, no. I was just going to say one thing Ben and I always point out is that, we wonder if the labels we place on things are really accurate. I understand, Heidi, that 2 of these creatures have been seen at the same time on occasion.
Yes, I have heard that.
Okay. So whether there's just one Mothman, I mean, you'd need a breeding population of at least 500 over a certain area.
You need a mate. Yep.
Yeah. And if this is a biological creature in the normal sense of the word, and if we've got a thin area, a thin place, as Native Americans would say, where the boundaries of these parallel worlds, if that theory is correct, are thin, these things are coming and going. And we've run into a lot of creatures and entities that come and go when they are able in order to eat. Okay, the whole parasite thing, at least according to our terms, maybe this is something that's going on. It may not be the same creature that was seen in the Ohio Valley in the 1960s. It could be just some other species or denizen of a parallel world or whatever. I mean, anything is possible. But I think
the bad creatures from Superman's Phantom Zone have finally escaped with Zod.
Hey, anything is possible, kid. That's the whole point of the multiverse. Anything that you can possibly conceive, you can conceive it because it exists somewhere or somewhere in the multiverse, and you have a certain presence throughout this thing because it's one great big consciousness in a sense.
After all the things that you both have witnessed, I have seen a lot of really bizarre things myself, and I don't question much. And a lot of people say, oh, well, you got to put more of a filter on it. It's like, when I've experienced it for myself with my own freaking eyeballs that I trust to drive me everywhere I go. I'm not going to question that. Yeah, sometimes people are a little bit wackadoodle, but you can pretty much spot those people out really easily. And they're not looking for glory, and it's just, if people could just accept some of these stories, their whole world would expand. If there is like one reality that you guys have witnessed that you wish people really got and really understood and really believed, what would it be?
Ben?
He's like,
wow, that's an amazing question. I really don't know. I think our consciousness is sort of bigger than all that. I think being how to put it? I think being conscious of other consciousnesses is the conscious thing to do. By that I mean I think it's kind of impossible, and I think it's also possible at the same time. The whole thing about the multiverse is it's a giant paradox. So things that don't seem to make sense also make sense. It's much like Wonderland in that way.
Yeah,
so
yes, it is.
In its own way, that it's just filled with paradoxes. Like, for example, when I was a teenager and I would ask my father questions, and he's like, "Well, in the multiverse, somewhere that's true," and I'm like, "It's not what I need, Dad. I need concrete answers, but there are no concrete answers. That's the thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to. That's not true. There are concrete answers, but there's a lot of subjectivity out there also. So
there is
another paradox.
So
well, it's odd that a gruesome place like Chicago would be pestered by this evil flying creature.
Well, I mean, if it's parasitical, it feeds on the negativity.
It's not the first time that something horrible has happened in Chicago.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Yeah.
Oh, what a
soon a lake monster's going to start bellowing up. Watch.
Oh, well, I don't have a lake monster.
Yeah.
Well, notice it doesn't happen in New York or anything like that.
Everybody's too busy to notice. But I think one of the issues is that excuse me, the negativity, of course, that we have, just in the world, and these things seem to feed upon it. There's a very chilling possibility that we have looked at and that we don't talk about it a lot because it's so chilling. And maybe this is one of the horrifying realities that's being kept secret. I don't know. Is that there is ample evidence of somebody messing with our genetics at the beginnings of our species. I mean, when the human genome was mapped in 2004, there were 223 genes that shouldn't be there if evolution as we understand it is correct. It's like somebody put them there. We are very ill adapted to our own environment. I mean, we're standing upright. I mean, our genitals and our stomach is exposed. We should be on all fours. It's just we don't fit here somehow. So it's like, if you're going to tell me somebody messed with us, I would have no trouble believing that. And the question is who or what and for what. There's ample evidence of incursions, as Van Daniken has mentioned. I mean, things like that, disjointedness in space and time, crossing of world boundaries, interaction of species who shouldn't interact, and all these things are all possible. But what really makes me wonder is, were we messed with by parasitical entities who created us
to farm us, to eat us?
To farm us. That's the word we use. Maybe not to eat us physically, although who knows, awful lot of people disappear. And we don't want to get nuts here either, but we have to consider the possibility that we may be a cattle race. Yeah. For lack of a better term, being raised for our food value.
I was thinking about that the other day, and I realized that if that statement is true, then how come we can be so positive?
Because there's another side to the story, to the record. I guess the vinyl's coming back, so people know what I mean. There's another side to that. We have encountered so many wonderful, positive. I'm not going to call them angels. I suppose you could call them. There are creatures like that. Anybody who's ever had a miraculous life saving, like I've had twice, would have no problem with the idea of angels, and certainly don't. They're present in the whole human consciousness. But there are lots of positive beings out there with whom we rub elbows, whether we know it or not. And again, this is an open system, these worlds. They're not particularly closed off. That's how parasites can get in. And I think there's far more positive energy out there. And the lesson here may be that it's up to us. You often hear the term, the world is what we make it. Well, it really is what we make it, maybe even literally. There's speculation in physics that our consciousness or the consciousness of the biosphere creates the physical world. So it really is kind of all up to us. So don't blame God when the goldfish dies. I mean, the positive nature of reality really depends on us. And I think there's a great lesson in that. In my opinion, the parasites are a species, a part of nature, just trying to live the way we do. They're not spirits. I've had physical encounters with them. And I think it's a matter of just, we have to repel. We find that they are repelled when you have positive energy. And what is that? Humor in a positive sense. Faith, love especially. when you come shoulder to shoulder with even strangers, or particularly with your loved ones. Tell them you love them now. Don't wait. And that's our big prescription for getting rid of negative entities in families, and it works.
I hear you. That's the one thing that I would hope that if people could really believe and know something, it's the outright reality that God is real and all of those beings associated with him. That's the one that I would choose.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, let me ask you this. I just, of course, I have a certain fondness for Pennsylvania. And do
you?
So that, yeah, I mean, I've been a Pittsburgh Steelers fan for 40 years.
Oh, he admits it. Okay, well, I love Pennsylvania too. I never had been there much before the last 20 years or so, but wonderful,
it's
wonderful
not as good
people.
as New York, but it's okay, But now let me ask you this. Now this, you said you're knee deep in research in that area that's around Pittsburgh, Western Pennsylvania, with that kind of a Bermuda Triangle-y kind of place. What are the boundaries of it? Basically, just right outside of Pittsburgh, kind of, and then go on down to Ohio.
Okay, well, actually, it's about 100 or more miles northeast of Pittsburgh. Okay, it's not. I'm saying that's where the Rome Trough goes, and the geology of this particular area is very interesting. And of course, sure, we find out that it's kind of the beginning of the Rome Trough. So there are, you name it, going on there. I think I don't know if we've talked about this on your show before, but in case we haven't, it's we're still pushing the envelope of the area. Ben and I were there in July, and pouring rain. It always pours rain when we're there. And there's a very interesting. Well, it's a natural gas harvesting area, but there's some questionable things going on. We're still looking into that. But there is military activity in the air, at least. We have neighborhood meetings with people. Up to 20 families will show up and talk about the Bigfoot experiences they've had. Shane Searway, in May of 16, we started the case, had the first Bigfoot experience of our team. I had one in September of 16, which knocked my socks off because I didn't expect it. I should know after 47, 48 years of being involved in this research that things never happen as you expect them to.
Of course.
And we've got a lot of interesting photographs, lights in the sky. There's shadow people activity. Heidi, you'll be delighted to hear in one of the houses. Shane, who is he goes gangbusters with these things. He's just a natural. He goes in and he walks in. He scares the heck out of these things. The big nasty one hasn't been seen since Shane walked into the house back in September of 16. So we're planning a trip. We wanted to get out there before winter started, but we're out of luck now till spring because this is heavy winter kind of area. So we'll be back out probably in May. But you name it, it's going on. Everybody, there was and Ben, you remember the little girl who came because we gave a presentation at this is the second neighborhood meeting we've had, and she was crying, and she had a very difficult and scary Bigfoot experience just up the road from where we were.
Yeah, I felt kind of bad. I didn't want to press her because these two weird guys with beards from Rhode Island.
Yeah.
Why? I was like, I don't expect her to talk to us. I wouldn't want to. I'm like, who are these guys?
Yeah, exactly. So we didn't press her, and there's another woman who still can't bring herself to tell us what. This was a possible abduction experience. Okay.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. There are UFOs seen over these places all the time, and we've got photographs. I mean, you name it, it's going on here. And again, this is what we call a flap area, an area where there is a multiple intersection, overlap of parallel worlds with different laws of physics and different kinds of beings that we interpret as paranormal appearances.
Well, you could call it an Eno area because it may be just following you guys.
Well, we'll have to coin that term, right? Hey, if you can coin shadow people, area. We can coin the Eno area.
Exactly.
Sounds kind of musical somehow.
Yeah, but it sounds like the San Luis Valley. It sounds like the San Luis Valley between New Mexico and Colorado.
Yeah.
That's
all kinds of things have been seen there, but it's not well inhabited enough to have the witnesses I think this Pennsylvania situation has. I don't know. Did I talk about my Bigfoot experience on your show before? I don't.
Oh, please do.
I think you did a long time ago, but I'm not.
Okay. Well, it wasn't that long ago. September of 2016, it occurred, and this was our second trip out there. Ben couldn't come on this trip, but Shane Searway and I were there, and we had been there in May and had gotten some photographs of a lot of strange lights in the sky, and this one particular field that was above the house where the main, sort of our headquarters is, and we're over there. I parked my truck where I had the previous May, and I'm expecting lights. I had camera set up expecting lights in the sky, right? And sure enough, suddenly, this is late at night, September 16th. I'm sorry, this voice of mine tonight it was a brilliant moonlit night, and I'd been out there for hours. All of a sudden, something to the right catches my attention. And the passenger side window of my truck was open. It was kind of chilly, so I had the other side shut. Through the window, I could see about 200 feet away a huge, brown, hairy figure moving very slowly. I remember the huge legs and knees moving up and down, 2 legs, up toward the center of this field. There's a brilliant moonlight. You could see it right there. I felt at peace. I felt privileged. Because Ben and I, we always kind of purify ourselves or pray before we go into a wilderness area particularly, and I had done that. Maybe that's why, what I got out of the experience, where the little girl was scared out of her skin.
No sense of foreboding. Right?
So I pick up the infrared camera, take a picture through the cold, shut window, so naturally there's no heat signature. So I went to get out of the truck very quietly, and my phone rings. It was Ben's mom. Closest I ever came to divorce.
Darn it.
And my ringtone was the theme from Lord of the Rings. So that comes blasting out over the field in the middle of the night in Pennsylvania. And I answered, I said, I'm in the middle of a Bigfoot sighting. So what? And so anyway, that was long gone. But the next morning we went up and actually just after that, I saw some lights in a tree. They didn't look weird or anything. Just like somebody was standing on the ground with flashlights. I said, what, Bigfoot's using flashlights now? But I found out the next night what that was. But in the morning, Shane and I went up, we measured everything off, and we found a huge track of some 2-footed thing that it was dry ground, but it was tall grass. So something on 2 legs that pushed its way through this grass. Now, at the neighborhood meeting the next night, I told this story, and a hand went up. And it was a woman named Melissa who lived in the house just on the other side of the field. And she said, oh, those lights, that was my son and me. We had come home and we heard something big moving through that field. At the same time I was seeing it. And the people are used to this stuff, so they went up into the field to see what it was, and it was gone by then. I guess my wife had chased it away. And they said they were shining lights. I said, why were you shining lights into the trees? She said, sometimes they're in trees, she said. That, if it's what it appears to be, was corroboration from a second and third witness of hearing what I was seeing. So
cool.
We kind of made notes on that one.
And they see in that area, they see the UFO things too, and
it's their house, as a matter of fact, is having the shadow people problems, and where there are strange lights over the house almost every night.
Oh, that's amazing.
Oh, my goodness.
I've always associated shadow people with alien beings. I mean, always from the start. And I got
even if they're not from other planets, they could still be aliens. From other worlds with other laws of physics. That's alien to me. I ran this big poltergeist case in Bridgeport, Connecticut, in 1974. I was working with the Warrens and a Catholic priest. I just had the feel. I was a 21-year-old seminary student. These were aliens. I don't mean from other planets, but just something utterly other. Yeah. There were 4 of them. Yeah, general. And I told Ed Warren, he didn't understand what I was saying, and because these are demons. They had to be demons. And this is where I had one of the physical encounters that I was afraid even to write about for years, because it totally shattered my belief system.
Oh, I bet.
It's supposed to be spirits, demons and exorcisms and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah. It shakes up the person's reality when you come across something like that. Yeah. And, I think that sometimes the audience believes that we were just born to be strong in these topics. It's like, I think we all went through a major shakeup when we realized, oh my gosh, there's other things.
We all have our stories.
Yes, we do. It's like we all have. We've grown. Let's just put it that way.
I hope it's growing. Yeah, I think so.
Goodness.
Anytime anything expands your perspective, I think it's a growth experience, or can be.
So you say that the area starts about 100 miles northwest or due north of Pittsburgh?
Well, I'm not going to tell people where it is, but it's it's in a small city there. Yeah, generally, but more and more people are coming forward, and the area is sort of spreading. It's open country, it's farm country, and there are a lot of woodlots, maybe 5-10 acres, and it's hilly country. And the question is, if everybody's seeing Bigfoot, I mean, where's the population? Where does it come? Where does it go? And as I say, you have to have a breeding population. We figure about 500 in order to populate that area. How come, there have been people who said if it's appeared right in front of them, disappeared. And to me, that's got multiverse written all over it. These are probably creatures, and the natives will tell you, if you can find any natives, that these are shapeshifters. They come and go from different worlds.
No, I saw one indoors.
That's possible.
I saw one indoors. That was the only Bigfoot that I'd ever seen. And,
really?
Well, we're coming right up to the top of the hour break, guys, and we'll be right back. Well, we're back with Paul and Ben. I don't know whether I'd acknowledge Heidi since she was slamming Georgia so hard.
Goodness.
Well, old hometowns, but.
But to finish what had happened with the Bigfoot, the indoor sighting, just to tell you guys real quick, I used to run a UFO paranormal discussion group for a very long time, and people would often come and think I was a psychic. I'm like, nope. But they still want me to come over to their house to, see what I feel or whatever. I'm like, oh my gosh. And this one lady just kept persisting. And I'm like, for me to come over because something weird was going on in her house. Things were being moved, and she just got weird vibes, and things would grab her at night, and just a whole bunch of weird stuff. So I said, I'll go with my friend. And so we go there, and it was like a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment above a bar that's still standing in Milwaukee. And, she's like, and over here, this is where I feel this, and this is where this happened, and this is when this got moved, and I feel like something's playing tricks on me. And me and my friend were like, okay. And then we go to sit down in her living room, and her couch faced her kitchen, and there was an overhang with the cabinets and the kitchen bar, and you could kind of look into the kitchen through that. And as she's talking to us, all of a sudden I see this thing just shimmy into reality in the middle of her kitchen. I jump up and I'm screaming and pointing, Bigfoot! And my friend screams at the same time, pointing, werewolf.
Werewolf?
Yes.
Werewolf.
I mean, because we didn't see its head because it got cut off with the cabinets in the way. And as soon as it it seemed to startle, oh crap, they could see me. And just like heat rising off a road, the mirage look, it just disappeared. And I mean, the woman was like, what did you see? Where? And I mean, I still get chills when I think about it. And I'm like, it looked like Cousin It. It was just shaggy, grayish, just solid hair. And I would guess that, I saw the backside of it. It was probably 5'7" or something. And it was just the craziest thing. And her bathroom, unfortunately, was through the kitchen, and I had to go. And I could still feel its presence there in the kitchen. And it was a bit a threatening feeling. It was just weird. I have never seen such a thing before. I don't know.
I might suggest some possible explanations there. One of the telltale signs we look for when a world boundary is present, and when you're looking at is that shimmery heat off the road kind of look. Not always, but sometimes. And of course, we have just like a lot of people are afraid of particularly pythons. I think that may go back to our remote ancestors who they would strangle them and eat them, if they were small. I don't know, but I think there are deep psychological reasons for our fear of these things. And of course, the electricity and certain electrical fields will make you feel like that. It'll make you afraid. certain sound, infrasonics, infrasound. Ben can talk about that. Will have the same effect on you because it's just the unknown, like on steroids. And especially if you saw it there. But that just sounds like a temporary crossover.
Something.
If I've ever heard one. Yeah.
Yeah. Craziness. Absolutely crazy. I don't know. I've never seen such a thing before. And hope to not see such a thing like that. Not so unexpected,
Right.
Craziness.
Well, there's the.
Y'all should release some exciting lies. Gee whiz.
I've got a question for you guys. I've had an experience, and I'm not going to go into too much detail on it because it's just, I don't have a category for this. But I was laying in my bed. This was, I don't know, maybe 7 years ago. And I was, not even going to sleep yet. Just got comfortable, just laid on the bed. And there was like street lights coming into my bedroom. And I'm like, do. And all of a sudden, a person's face showed up. And I mean, just their face. And
just a disembodied face?
It was he's just spoke. The thing spoke, and he essentially told me, and I'll just, the first thing he said was, "Don't trip out."
Don't what?
Like, don't trip out. Like, don't flip out. And don't say anything. And then he gave me a message that I'm gonna keep to myself, and I'm like, what the heck was that? I have never seen or heard of such a thing, just as solid as anything. And it was a face of someone who is, I don't know, he's kind of known, and I didn't know who he was, though. It was just the weirdest thing. And I mean, what is that? Is that somebody that's knows how to, I don't know, teleport an image of themselves?
I actually have run into, this has been since the 70s, but during an exorcism case, we were researching the background of this person, and they were saying that they got involved in some kind of satanic group where supposedly certain people had the ability to effectively use the parallel worlds to travel instantaneously to where they already were there in a particular place where they had to deliver a message, and you'd actually see a person appear or disappear, just as sometimes UFOs do, Bigfoots do, and all this sort of thing. I think this is sort of a mode of, not to get Harry Potterish here, but a sort of mode of transportation for those who are in the know, or whatever creatures are multiversal in their feeding habits or whatever, and that's why things can appear and disappear. So there may be something to that.
I just don't even know how to categorize it. That's interesting. It was a positive message, but we specialize in things you can't categorize. Like one of our one term, and just to not be outdone by our good friend Heidi, one term we have coined is the flashing nexus. Yeah. Ooh.
Okay, that's and Ben was explaining that on the air the other day. I first read it in 1970, not 70, in the 1970s, when a man who had been on an operating table came to me and said, you talk about out of the body experiences. I had something that I've never even heard of that has no category to it, and that is, he was lying on the table, and all of a sudden, his consciousness, he wasn't even out. He was just lying there. He was the doctor. And he kept his sense of humor because they said he had the doctor's knowledge, all his memories, but just for a few seconds. And he said it was a good thing because he was about to start operating on himself. It was a good thing he had his knowledge as well. And then all of a sudden he was the nurse. And then he was somebody driving by in a car outside. And he said this was as real as his own consciousness. And I didn't know what to do with this. I'd never heard this before. I figured maybe the guy's just a nutball. But then I started running into it again and again, not very commonly. But sometimes it was somebody's just going through their waking day, and all of a sudden there's somebody else. And so I came up with the term flashing nexus. Nexus being the center of the core being of the biosphere, where perhaps your central life of all your parallel lives are, and you just have something, kind of a glitch in your consciousness where you're just flashing consciously from one to another. So hence the term flashing nexus. And I ran into a case relatively recently, secondhand, but we put it out on the air in our show. We'd like to hear more reports of this thing if people think it's happening to them.
Okay, so I got one for you, another one. Okay, so I have had people write me over the years, even before I was really getting word out there about anything, and people would recognize me from showing up and helping them out with something. I am not kidding.
Isn't that nice?
It was weird.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's just so much more.
I don't know how to figure that.
I've been mistaken for a Florida judge. That's as exotic as that got with me.
But it's just so bizarre, and it just gets stranger and stranger. And then they'll send me an image of themselves, and like, do I look familiar? You showed up in my dream. Why were you there? I don't know who you are.
Yeah, I get that too. Yeah. Well, again, it's the multiverse at its best, if we're right. And what do we say, Ben? What's one of our mottos? Explaining the paranormal is not the problem; it's handling
the explanations.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that we're all able to do these things, like you said. I really do.
Let me ask you this: now you used to be on Sundays. I mean, on Mondays. Are you on Sundays now up there in
yes, we were on Monday drive time, and the station manager in his wisdom, and he is one of the most intelligent people we know, said you're going to do better in a Sunday slot, because we wanted to do on-location broadcasts, and the station didn't have the staff for that on a Monday night. So we have been able to do all kinds of great stuff, because it takes 10 years off Ben's life, because he had to be the producer until recently.
Oh, God. Remote broadcasts are the worst thing.
Well, now it's Josh's problem. So, but we went up to New Hampshire 2 years in a row. We've done live broadcasts with the panel at the Exeter UFO Festival, including Richard Dolan and Kathy Martin, and just a fantastic group. And people have found out about this in the local area, because you can't get our station in the local area unless you listen online. And people were coming to the door that they paid $10 to get in just to listen to the show and participate in the audience. And
really?
We didn't know they were going to do that, but it was for charity, the Kiwanis Club. And they said they didn't want to pay the whole thing, but they said, would you pay $10? Oh, yeah, sure. So all these people are forking over to come in and listen to our show.
Cool.
So, but, it's good for charity.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
We broadcast from a charity walk in Providence. That was a riot because the city people in the park didn't realize we were still on the air and turned off all the power. They
turned off power, like, in the middle of the broadcast.
I never saw you run so fast, Ben, after the city truck and got to turn it back on. Meanwhile, we're on our cell phones communicating with the station.
Jeez.
So we've had our adventures in the broadcast world.
Sounds like it. Jeez.
But anyway, it's Sunday night up there. You can get it, I guess, on the internet or I guess iTunes.
Yeah. It's Sunday afternoon, noon to 1, which we thought was an awful slot, but no, it's good, especially because people in other time zones. We have a big listenership in Australia for some reason, and Mexico.
Oh, really?
And Mexico's not that different time-wise, but it's WOON. It's 1240 on the AM dial, and we are having a good authority soon to be an FM feed as well. You can get it to on onworldwide.com. There's a website there that will carry it live, and that's ONTV icon or the
stream. The station
network. It's a stream. Yeah,
they have multiple streams for the different portions of their network.
What about the book situation? The latest book came out in 16 or what's it?
Well, just July of 17. Just one more word on the show. If you go to behindtheparanormal.com, there are 730 hours of shows if you have the time.
Yes,
I know.
We're in our 10th year on the air, so they're all there. So anyway, thank you. The book. I've written a bunch of books before this, but the two books we've written together are Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong. That came out from Schiffer in 2016 and November. It's been out for about a year now. And then in July of this year, we had Behind the Paranormal 2, Bigfoot, Mothman, and Monsters You Never Heard Of. So The first one is in stores. The second one, we had to bring it up very quickly. Schiffer let us do it on our own, with our own long existing but dormant publishing house, and that's available on Amazon and Kindle and maybe in some stores. I don't know yet, but we're still getting the marketing going on that. So there are two of those.
Well, you're a very prolific writer, just like Heidi. Heidi puts out books every 5 minutes, but
no.
Since I teamed up with Ben, it's been quicker. But it usually takes me five years to write a book. And everything is I make a living writing, so I have to write other things.
Thank God.
Yeah, right. Well, guys, we're coming up to our last break. We'll be right back and might check up on one of my little interesting areas. I'll ask you when we get back. Well, it's great to be back with Paul and Ben, and I guess I was going to ask you also about the old famous Bridgewater Triangle, because that's always been one of my little interesting... Oh,
that's right, in our neighborhood. Both of us live about 12 miles from each other, and we're not too much farther than that from the triangle, maybe 20 miles.
I think we're equidistant from it now.
Yeah.
Is it holding its own with phenomenology, or...?
Well, it is. People are... there's an opinion that it's already been done to death, but we think it's just beginning. We have a very dear friend who is a filmmaker, Alexander Petikoff. You should check him out. He made an excellent documentary about the Bridgewater Triangle, and there have been many. We ourselves had some interesting experiences there over the years. At one point, we were kind of bombing around in our four-wheel drive out there, and we stopped to admire a lovely lake, got out, and we immediately felt as if we were being watched, because this is a state park. It's a management area, so there's nobody lives around here, a few. And I just shot some photos into the woods, and sure enough, and, you have to be very careful. And, I did photography in the military and analysis and stuff, and you have to be very careful of the play of light on a sunny day in the woods. Okay. Now, there was no wind on this day either, but still you have to watch out. But there were a couple they looked like figures with flesh tones. And in this latitude, you don't see that except for certain kind of fungi. These are readily viewable at newenglandghosts.com, one of our websites, and just look at cases. And the first one is the Bridgewater Triangle, cases in New England anyway. And you can see those pictures. So, it knocked the socks off some experts, and then sure enough, 5 years later, we encountered a man who had been walking his dog in this area and had seen a similar figure, and was trying to encourage him to come into the woods. And locally, these are known as pukwudgies. Yeah. And in the Algonquian language, and our good friend. A professor from Wahabahadi Al-Mawid is her name, and she was able to point out that the Algonquian language has the word pukwudgeej, which is where this comes from. Little people, essentially. Right. And we may have gotten some photographs of those, and I've talked to witnesses who have encountered them, and as Ben will tell you, the Wampanoags have that's part of their tribal land, but they don't like to stay there.
No, it's too weird.
Yeah, would they have a meeting like once a year or something of the council?
Yeah, something like that. But no one wants to live on it because they're just like, it's too weird. We don't want to live here.
Yeah.
Really?
Their ancestors.
Well, as I understand it, instead of going into upstate New York, the Pukwudgies stay in Massachusetts, don't they?
Well, in this case, yeah. One of the things we notice with flap areas is there's always some kind of military or paramilitary presence that we think is, and now in the Bridgewater area, we were commenting on this very day as we were driving in the middle of nowhere on the dirt roads that, we haven't run into the military here yet. Sure enough, we come around a corner onto another dirt road in the middle of nowhere. There's a whole line of unmarked, it looked like utility trucks with all these guys in sunglasses kind of watching us go by. And there were no utilities, no wires. And it was, so we may have run into something weird there. That was,
sounds like
puts it in line with other flap areas.
I've been associated with special forces people and the stuff like that, and I wasn't personally in the special forces, but a lot of my friends have been. But I've never heard any mentions of anybody dealing with these issues. I wonder what branch they would be.
Well, that's funny. My experience is the same. I had some training. I was rubbing elbows with spooks now and then, or whatever. I didn't. My clearance wasn't that high, but you hear things. And I never and everything in intelligence, because it's mission specific and core mission only, and mission specific and need to know only, that kind of thing. However, once in a while you hear a rumor. So these guys I never heard really much of anything about Area 51 or anything like that, but of course that's not the area I was working in, right? Particularly in the Coast Guard. So, but I don't know. It's how these things are very highly compartmentalized, Kevin. I mean, you wouldn't know what was going on, and you wouldn't really hear what's going on. But after people are retired or dying in their beds, maybe they'll say something. But back in the day,
also hobnobbing I did was more like special forces people, not like intelligence people. That I guess.
Right. Oh yeah, right. So and sometimes they work together, sometimes they don't. But people had a sense of secrecy in those days. Now, it was in the 70s when I was in the first time that they kind of realized that you really can't keep secrets anymore, because they saw the internet coming and all this, and so you give out false information, accurate information from inaccurate sources and vice versa. And everybody loves a mystery, and everybody keeps guessing, and you keep your secrets.
Yeah. Well, I do remember this came up just recently. People were talking about with the latest UFO disclosure business and all that. Do you realize even a powerful person like Senator Barry Goldwater from the past, he approached when he was a lieutenant general in the Air Force too, remember? And Goldwater approached Curtis LeMay, I guess at the time chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, or else Secretary of the Air Force, one of the two at the time. And,
he was chairman of the Chiefs.
Goldwater, but that's right. But what he did was Goldwater made inquiries on the UFO thing, and
yes, he did.
Curtis LeMay basically slapped him back down and just keep your nose out of it kind of thing, in kind of a brusque way. And you're talking to somebody that's a senator on the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee. I mean, one of the main major domos, and to talk to him like he was a janitor was really wild, that he would be able to get away with it. I mean, in other words, how could this be? How could that be that distorted? Somebody of Goldwater's stature be told to mind his own business?
Well, there may be something to be said for this shadow government idea. That there's a and somehow the Navy is always very important in a lot of these things. But
what's up with the old Navy? I mean.
Well, I don't know. Somehow, I heard a few things I don't feel comfortable talking about, but nothing really big. But why they might be involved, I don't know.
I've heard that too, though. I have heard rumors of that too.
Yeah,
but
somehow
what's so odd. It just, I don't know. We can't keep a secret on anything else. It's weird we could keep a secret on anything.
You have secrets, but, there's a lot of information floating around, but how accurate is it? Which goes back right to the beginning of our discussion. That's the thing. You have, the whole term disinformation is a term to be paid attention to. It works. It satisfies a lot of people, and it's used very heavily.
Isn't that the truth? It's disgusting, but it's worked for a very long time.
There's a lot of turf in these things.
Well, they slapped Clinton. They slapped Clinton back down when he tried to inquire into it.
Yeah,
he sure did. He told that Sarah McLaughlin, or whatever her name was, the Washington Post, he made every.
Well, it's like this New York Times article. I mean, that gentleman that came forward, that Luis Elizondo, he came forward because he's seeking funding to continue his search into this whole
thing.
He's literally trying to.
Yeah, I don't know.
Totally, he's trying to fund it, and it's like, dude, do you think they really pulled the funding away? He even admitted that he had a successor, that someone took over his position. It's not closed, and they're obviously not disclosing it to Harry Reid and Elizondo about what's really going on. I mean, they're tapping on things, but I don't think they're ever going to get the full picture. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, and they do it on purpose.
And that's well put. And we may not know. Nobody may know what's really going on, and if they do, it's probably a handful of people.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Well, it sure makes for an interesting inquiry. Well, listen, guys, it's been great having you. I always enjoy it, and I hope things are...
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's always a pleasure.
Indeed.
Yeah, and I love your radio voice. Best one I know, Kevin.
Oh, for sure.
I need better work on it.
Needs to pay.
What? You know what? That's it. I'm done. I quit.
No, we're just kidding. We love you.
I know. It's all good.
Nah, she's not that much. But at any rate... But anyhow, listen, you take care, and we'll sure talk to you soon.
Great. Look forward to it.
Indeed.
Yes, you guys take care.
Okay.
Have a great night.
Okay, bye-bye.
Now, next week, Heidi, we're going to actually take a break. And we're going to run an archive show, and then we're going to have Dan Perkins on the first Tuesday in January. And,
all right. Yeah, because it's Christmas time, so we got to say Merry Christmas to everybody.
Well, certainly have a Merry Christmas, and I don't know. One thing I am very certain of is the reality of God and all that, and no matter how complex a situation he's got, I know he's there, and Jesus is there, and it's okay.
Jesus is no joke, as I always say.
No, he's not. And but I mean, things are still in good hands, even though things are a little more complex. But there are allusions to that in the Bible. We'll talk about some other time. But
this Friday on my show, I'm going to have the Physics of God author. I think it's timely for Christmas.
That sounds just fine. That sounds very good. Well, I recommend everybody see that or listen to that. Okay, well, Heidi, I guess we better say goodnight then to these folks. Say hello.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Good night.
You bet.